It is a scam when you don't allow everyone to operate on fair terms.
We are the Robin Hoods of sports betting. We take something back from the rich bookies and enable our customers to beat them instead.
G'day everyone, Alex here. Welcome to the Trademate Sports Betting Podcast once again. Today I'm joined by the CEO of Banach Technology. I hope I pronounced that right, mate. His name's Mark Hughes. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Alex. You got the name spot on. Well done.
Yeah, all right, that's a good start. So, mate, what we're going to talk about today, obviously, your business, Banach Technology, which is, I guess, like a supplier to bookmakers. What kind of services that you provide, and also, like, towards the end, I'd love to ask some just general gambling industry questions. But I thought we could just start off with your journey to starting this company, Banach Technology, and you used to be a quantitative analyst. Sorry, geez, bit of a tongue twister for Paddy Power. So can you tell us a bit about your time with Paddy Power and what exactly like a quantitative analyst does?
Yeah. So Paddy Power is actually my first job out of college. I actually studied finance in college, so it's kind of targeting towards some sort of a analytical type job in finance, but always had a bit of a love for gambling growing up, so I saw there was a job in Paddy Power and kind of knew a couple of people working there, tried to understand what was happening inside the company, so joined back in when I was 22 years of age, back in 2008. And my first few months were basically working on the trading floors as a risk manager. A lot of the job would be kind of managing the customer activity, so what type of bets they were placing, were the sharp punters, following any of the activity from sharp punters and changing betting lines based on that, basically. So learning from the volume of money coming in and understanding how to process that type of information and protect yourself against variables that you might necessarily have captured in your original price. So those first 5 months were very useful to me because I'll get on to explaining a little bit about what a quant does, but essentially the mechanics of how a trading floor works was learned through that time, understanding how I guess naively before I came to working with Paddy Power, you don't really think a lot about how a price is created, and you don't think a lot about the amount of prices that a bookmaker has to manage at any one time. So you're coming in and just, I suppose, you kind of have this naive thought that it's hard to beat the bookmaker, so therefore they must just be really on top of everything, and must be like insanely complicated processes that just keep all the prices right, and you just don't think about it. But when you actually arrive in, you realize that it's everyone's human at the end of the day. It's not actually that straightforward to manage tens of hundreds of thousands of prices nowadays that are live at any one time, and you do only have a certain amount of information. So the risk manager's job is to, I suppose, spot areas where your pricing might be weak and let traders know, and traders react to it. And again, it's just a process of evolution that just keeps sharpening the price as the day goes on. So I always was keen to understand definitely much more the technical side of it, and getting into the nuts and bolts of, okay, well, I made that decision for that reason. So like a series of sharp punters bet on a certain selection. The obvious thing is the price must be too high. So, cut the price. So why did I do that? I think about the process in my head, the thought process that went into it. I tried to understand the mechanics of how that decision was made, which really, I suppose, was suitable for that type of quant mindset. So I moved over to quants about in my 6th month and worked there for 6 years post that. And I guess the job of a quant is to understand exactly the mechanics of what a human is doing when they're making these critical decisions on a trading floor, and automate as much as that thought process as possible. And the reason why this is helpful in the evolution of how the gambling, I suppose, ecosystem works is that once you've automated a simple thought process, then the trader or the expert on the floor doesn't have to think about that anymore, because the machine essentially is creating a higher basis for simple critical decisions that make their life easier. So then they free up their time to think about more nuanced decisions. So like a simple example is, like, if a lot of punters bet on a particular selection and we know which ones are the sharp ones, we know that, and if there's a lot of sharp activity in a particular selection, there's no need for somebody to, almost like an operator, come and see the sharp bets and then cut the price. You can do that with a machine. So then that person that was previously responsible for looking at an alert on a monitor, they would now go to think about the next thing. So the nuance of, well, how do we find the next sharp punter? And then the quant would come back around and actually, create a system that would automate that thought process. So it's kind of that type of thinking, trying to simplify it a little bit, but that I suppose challenge is put on the quants team at all times. And that's evolved into all facets of a trading floor and managing any sort of trading service. So if you're creating a price for a football game, you look at historic data. Again, just go back to the manual process, because none of this is rocket science in a sense. It's all doing the exact same thing that a human would do. You'd look at historic data, you look at the relative strengths of teams, you try to figure out a probability of them winning, and that would be your fundamental price that you go up at. Once you go up at the price, you'd let your customers tell you where you're right and where you're wrong, and you'd automatically react to that. So you can write a model or an automated decision engine for all those critical decisions. So what's the initial price? How do we react to market activity that's coming in? How do you react, or how do you relate that price to all the other offerings? So you have match betting, you have total goals, you have first half goals, you have first half, second half goals. All of this stuff can all be written into one critical decision engine. And because you're using a computer for it, you can increase the complexity and the speed of that decision to a scale that you're never going to get with a manual operation. And that's really what's driven the breadth and explosion of product in sports betting over the last decade. It's this idea that you can, automate a lot of it and get humans to concentrate more on the really, really difficult, nuanced stuff. But then the machine catches up with it, because you get the quant to look at, okay, well, why did you make that decision? What was the machine doing wrong? How can I improve it? How can I automate it more? And it's just an evolutionary process. As far as in my time, it hasn't stopped. There's always something wrong with a model. There's always something wrong with the machine, but just gets better and better. And that's the process of how a quant interacts with the expert, essentially.
Yeah. But mate, I was going to ask, you said a little bit earlier that you were kind of, I guess it's a bit interesting because I guess Paddy Power, being a soft bookmaker, they tend to, I guess, in terms of risk management, rather, I guess, limit players rather than, look at sharp money and adjust their price that way like they'd normally err towards the first option. Was that something you would encourage to do, was to actually look at sharp money, and I guess how would you do that?
Yeah, so I guess it's where you're positioning your brand really as a bookmaker, and what your addressable market is, right? So if you're looking at brands like Paddy Power and a lot of the high street brands that we'd all be familiar with, their product offering is very wide. They're offering, the ability to bet on player propositions and multiple different lines, total goals and multiple different lines, and a very recreational product. Okay, so I guess to offer that volume of product and to offer that volume of events, it's very difficult to actually say that you're also going to be, trying to beat sharp players. So I suppose in contrast, what I compare it to is the Pinnacle model. The Pinnacle model looks at, the markets that matter, and they play a serious game of, look, we'll let you bet against us, but we're going to use that information to sharpen the lines, and we'll back ourselves to make a profit off you. But we're going to focus on a manageable amount of content, and content where we have enough information that we don't feel like the asymmetry in the information is against us, right? So I guess we were encouraged to operate within those parameters, if you know what I'm saying. So
it must be hard
that,
to track sharp money if it eventually gets limited, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess the goal is to create a recreational product, and you did like Paddy Power restrict customers. A lot all the high street bookmakers restrict customers, and the thought process behind it is that we're not going to beat those customers with this breadth of content. So we restrict them, and we create a product and try to attract, I suppose, lower staking recreational customers. Essentially, was the goal, and still is the goal for a lot of bookmakers. And to try to create a brand and to create marketing around that as well to attract that type of customer. And it's more of creating a betting experience rather than, I guess, being honest, what I'd be into is probably more how do you beat the bookmaker? How do you get the price right? How can you actually play that game? But that's not the game that the majority of the bookmakers are in. They want a guy who wants to make the match more interesting and have a bet on it and to make it more exciting. So that's the product they're trying to serve up.
Yeah. So how would you then, so you did say that you did look at sharp money. So how are you actually able to do that within a recreational product?
Yeah. So I guess, sharp money comes in anyway, but you need to identify what is sharp and know that, acknowledge that some of these guys are going to beat you. And that's why those accounts get restricted. But new accounts open up all the time. And there's also, there's further challenges then where as these new accounts open, are they the same person as an existing account? How can you link accounts together? There's the know your customer challenges that come with all of that. And again, even quants can look at all these decisions as well and try to figure out how to link as many of these different variables together and figure out what's going on. But because there's always new accounts and always new activity, there's always sharp money and there's always ways to track it. And then don't forget, there's lots of sharp money that's coming from, automated bots. And, the most common term that we hear is arbors, which is essentially somebody who sees, they're tracking the Betfair line for you, essentially. Betfair is creating an arbitrage opportunity. So they place a bet on both sides and they take the small cut. We'd restrict arbors, but you wouldn't close them because, there's information coming from those bets. And because on their side, the bet is probably automated, they might be restricted, but they're quite happy to keep playing. And bookmakers quite happy to take that information at the appropriate level so that you can sharpen the lines.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's very interesting that you can still, I guess, get sufficient information, even though you can limit them to whatever, and they're still happy to take that bet.
Yeah. And like there's instances where there's guys that, aren't punting in an automated fashion and probably would beat the bookmaker, but the bookmaker knows, look, you'd be smart about keeping certain accounts to a level where it's fair that the customer will still make money from punting with you, but it's a fair game because you're getting information back from them. So there was plenty of that happened too, where you know that you're not going to win money off, say, Alex here that's betting, but let Alex have enough out of it that he stays playing. So that was a thought process as well.
Yeah.
But again, I'll repeat the point. Like someone like Pinnacle would do that all the time, like to keep customers, and they would. I don't know the inner workings of Pinnacle, but I'd imagine to manage limits in an efficient manner to protect themselves when information is low, and as they get more confidence, then they increase limits to take bigger bets, and that's how to make their profit. It's very similar thought processes, only I guess just a few extra different parameters in a different target market. Essentially, is the main challenge.
Yeah. So, mate, what spurred you on to create Banach then, and maybe just explain them, as easily as possible.
Yeah. So when I joined Paddy's, it was like the start of was definitely very close to the start of this kind of movement from manual trading over to quantitative trading. And I was pretty lucky. The team I joined was just full of guys who I guess came together at the same time and had a real passion for it and also had a flair for it. So we created a lot of, I suppose, betting algorithms to, create tons of different content on the Paddy Power side over the 6 years that I was there. And that's what really drove me, creating new content and working as a quant, and I suppose making progress and seeing those products go live. There came a point towards the end of my time where I guess the company was growing quite quickly and branching into new markets. And as with every big company, priorities of the business start to change and start to shift to, bigger opportunities and growing geographically and, technology, trying to keep up with that as well. So the emphasis shifted a little bit away from, I guess, how we were positioned in it as a small company working on, problems that were really focused on the trading floor and really focused on creating that type of content. And I guess it was my role started to change a little bit towards being involved in, that, I suppose, different thinking and a different role the trading floor had within the organization. And I took a step back from it and just had a little bit of think about what I wanted to do next. And a few of the guys that I had been working with in my time in Paddy's had left, like in around the same time or maybe a little bit before me and some a little bit after me. And there's the four founders of Banach basically were the guys who I suppose started in the quants team. One of the founders started 4 or 5 years before me, and we just liked working together and we liked solving problems. So we figured, that's what drives us. So let's create a company that it creates this type of product and see, can we sell it as a B2B? It wasn't any really great vision or anything like that. We just knew we were good at what we did. We wanted to create a company that focused in on exactly what we were good at and tried to narrow the scope to doing what we were good at, and just have some fun doing it. So our first client, surprisingly, was Paddy Power coming back asking for some services. So that was nice to work with them in that capacity. And then it just went from there. We just started to work with other companies and got a bit of momentum, and we're still doing what we love doing, and it's just, I guess that's it really. It's nothing more complicated than that or visionary than that.
No, it's awesome, mate. Before we get into like some of the markets that you guys provide for bookmakers or that you supply for bookmakers, I just wanted to get like a general statement. Like, do you provide the technology, or are you also compiling or managing the compiling and trading side too?
Yeah, I describe it as a bit of both, to be honest. So, the team, we've been working together for like about 10 or 12 years at this stage. And, in that time, especially when you're B2C with Paddy Power, we were heavily involved in the thought process behind the trading. Like, they had a full trading floor where traders would be making the critical decisions in real time, but we'd provide the tooling for it. But at the same time, we sat close to that trading floor, and we understand how it worked. So we understand how a trading floor operates. And in Banach, we now have traders who have, over a decade experience working in that environment too. So we're capable of building out a trading floor if we see that being the opportunity. But right now, to date, we started by positioning ourselves with products for the customer. So that would be products that we're going to talk about in a little while, which is like build a bet, flash markets, player props. We'd manage that product from creation to settlement. So we create the initial line, we'd manage the line, we'd understand what the market is doing, we'd move the line and, taking all that information into account. And we would settle the bets and send signals back to the bookmaker as to how they should pay it. So in theory, you could outsource the entirety of managing that product to us. But I guess from a bookmaker's perspective, those products are, kind of around the edge of their core product. Their core product is like betting on match betting, betting on total goals and all the things that we're familiar with. And that's where the full service comes in, where you can't afford to be, you have to be very efficient. You can't afford to be wrong with your pricing too often. You have to really be on top of the entire operation. I'd like to see us moving more into that. We're more than capable of doing it. We're doing it with one client at the moment. And I guess it's an area where I think we could definitely add value, but that's a pretty competitive market, and there's some good service providers in there already. So we'll see where the future brings us.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, let's get into it, mate. The first one I wanted to talk about was bet builders, which is something that I guess in recent years it seems like every bookmaker is incorporating into, or at least most of the big bookmakers are incorporating into their service. So for those who don't know, I mean, brief explanation, it's basically an accumulator except within one game. So I guess you can combine, the winner, first goal scorer, how many corners, whatever, all this kind of stuff into one bet. Are they, in terms of margins, are they the exact same as a normal accumulator in terms of like, or do you see them as more of an attractive proposition for the punter because you can be betting on similar circumstances?
Yeah, no, it's the way they're positioned at the moment is definitely high margin. Like an accumulator. I guess when you're starting to combine more selections, it's harder. It's harder for the recreational customer to understand what the price should be, and it's also harder for odds comparison site to compare those prices across and create a competitive market for it. So what that's resulted in is a high margin product where the bookmaker can be quite defensive in their pricing. Again, as with all new products, it's an evolutionary process. If you go live with a new product, you don't have a marketplace to directly compare it to, so you are a little bit fearful that customer will beat you on it, and the operator will make the decision to put a lot of margin into new products more often than not. And as other operators come online and start to compete in this space, and as they start to learn from customers, and as they start to learn where the pricing is weak and strong, competition starts to drive that price down. It's not just particular to bookmaking. It's like anything in life, you start off, and as competition comes in, you start off with a lot of margin in a new product. As competition comes in, it drives the margin down and the product becomes more and more competitive. So short term, the game is to just get a bet builder product live, a bet builder product that to the customer has an experience where they can combine selections within a game and get a price, and most customers will be happy with that. But as the product evolves and as customers learn more about it, and as the market learns more about it, the more scrutiny will come on how much margin has been taken, and the more that it'll drive, in my opinion, it'll drive margins on these products down. And that's where quality of pricing comes in and quality of provider. We'd back ourselves, no matter how far you drive the margin down, we have a pretty sophisticated build-a-bet engine, and we kind of would like to encourage operators over time to actually be, drive more competition in it. But it's a balancing act. Like, I totally get it. But bookmakers are going to, it's like, economic theory, they're going to try to get the sweet spot between supply and demand, and just, if there's no point in driving the price down if it's not pushing up volume. So that's where it's positioned at the moment, but it doesn't have to be that way. So it's high margin.
So how does that actually work in terms of applying a high margin? Because I mean, at least the few times that I've done a bet builder, it seems like it's the same odds as if I was going to do a single. So if I had, Arsenal versus Liverpool or something, Liverpool at 2.0 in odds, like when I go to click on Liverpool 2.0 odds, it's not like their odds change when I start doing a bet builder. Is it like once you've, put it all together that the margin's applied to that accumulator, I guess?
Yeah, it really depends on the bookmaker that you're using. like again, what happens in the background is the prices are, for the way we do it anyway, the prices are all 100% line. So we'll come up with a probability, and let's say Liverpool are 2.0, and in your example, the 100% line is, the fair price is probably 2.1 or something like that. Okay, on the single. As you start adding in bet builder might go and say, right, the fair price is 2.3, but just before it offers that price to you, it applies margin. And on the single price, it might go with the more competitive margin curve. So it'll say 2.1 is the 100% line, but we're going to be quite competitive and only take a small margin. So I'm going to offer you 2.0. But if the bet builder is 2.3, it might have a more defensive margin curve and say, okay, 2.3, you're going to take that bit more margin and still offer you 2.0, which is a bad experience for the customer. And this is kind of what I've been getting at, like with, as the market evolves and as the customer discovers the product more, that dynamic might actually start to push bet builders to be a little bit more competitive, which for me, that'd be absolutely fine. I think that's the game. That's why you need to be providing quality service so that you can actually get the price right. Because quite often as well, as you build a bet builder, like if you try to build a really complex, it's quite a complex engine to do it right, especially if you have like 4 or 5 interrelated events. If you build a model that that maybe you just didn't have enough time to build it properly, or the data or the technology is difficult to get right, like it's one of the more complex models to build. The easiest thing in the world to get the product live is to say, well, just put a lot of margin on it. So it doesn't matter if you're a little bit wrong, just put loads of margin on it and get it out in front of customers. And that's, more often than not, that's probably the right thing to do, because better to have the product than not and waiting for it to be perfect. So that's what's happening as well.
Yeah. So I guess in the short term, you said you think it'll become more competitive as the years go on in terms of pricing. Would you say that maybe people should stay away from them, like in the current market state, and then maybe at least for the short term, and then in the long term, then it's probably something that's a lot more attractive?
Well, it really depends on why what's your reason for betting, if you're betting to find an edge and make money, I'm sure I'm convinced there's definitely edges if you go through all the different bet builders, and if you forensically analyze it and figure out where to find an edge with it. I'm sure sometimes it'll even beat the margin. There's no doubt about that. But there are probably lower limits that'll allow you a lower stake, and it'll be harder to beat the margin because the margin will be bigger on the bets. So I guess I wouldn't probably invest my time in trying to beat bet builders if your goal is to try and make money punting. But then the flip side of that is risk management algorithms won't be sharp to bet builder customers. So if you do find an edge in bet builder, you probably keep a run on it for a while before they cop onto it. And that goes the same for accumulators. Now I know practices have definitely improved over the years, but strong accumulator punters are harder to find at times, especially if you're smart about how you mix up your betting activity.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So that should be your consideration.
Yeah, I know. I mean, definitely. I mean, we always tell people that do value betting that it's always smart to just throw in a accumulator every now and then, and hopefully it throws off a bit of scent. But it's it's such a it's such an unknown, isn't it, as to what certain bookmakers are looking at and what's actually going to work and what's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a hard game to try and beat recreational bookmakers. Not because you can't beat their price, like you will beat their price, but they're going to restrict you. So you also have that battle then to try and continuously stay ahead of the restrictions. Or find ways around the restriction. It's not. I'd much rather try beat an exchange, which is harder. But if you can beat an exchange, you can stay. Playing.
I mean, it's the old saying of with soft bookmakers. This is the old saying of not if, it's just when. So
Yeah.
But yeah, mate, I wanted to talk about flash markets, and I mean, I'd actually never really heard of, or I think I might have heard of them, but I'd never actually seen it in an actual bookmaker. But I guess since I probably don't know them, there's probably a few others listening that have no idea what flash markets are. So I thought I'd give a brief description of what they are. So it's on your website. It says it's an in-play offering and encouraging recycling with Banach flash markets. Odds available are all in play on events to happen in the next minute. So you can bet on things like goals, shots, crosses, corners, cards, etc. And the markets are always available and settled in real time. How on earth do you go about like pricing up these flash markets? And because I mean, it must be pretty crazy, to offer up a market, to price up a market where you're seeing is there going to be a shot on goal between the 50th and the 51st minute kind of thing.
Yeah, look, with great difficulty is probably the honest answer. The reason for flash markets, again, it's zoning in on this kind of recreational angle, where you're trying to create an experience. And a lot of people, actually, I like to bet to make money, but if I am betting for fun, I kind of just like the buzz of watching something and getting a quick result. So I really don't like betting on outrights where I have to wait the full season to get my money back,
It's terrible.
So I definitely have this mindset of, if you're watching a game, especially with a mobile device, bet on something to happen. And, if you lose, at least you can get involved in the next event and play that way. Fully knowing that you're not going to make money at it, but it kind of makes the experience of watching the match a lot more fun. So that's what flash markets is geared towards. American sports are going to be, perfect for this, especially NFL, like play to play, drive by drive, that type of market where everybody analyzes a drive and is, talking about everything that's going to happen, and it will be a pass.
It's one way to make one of the most boring sports to watch, or at least I'm probably going to piss off a lot of Americans, but it would. NFL is just horrible to watch for myself, so it's a good way to keep it going.
No, but it is like there will be more products like that, and there's some pretty cool companies doing some good stuff in the space as well. But our product at the moment, we have a version of it for NFL, but we have for football, for soccer, is the one that we have live, and it's betting on what will happen in the next minute or what will happen in the next 5 minutes, or depending on what time interval that you want. And again, it's just to keep the customer engaged. And the recycling part of it is that, I suppose a goal for a lot of not just bookmakers but anybody with an entertainment based app is to keep people on the app. So that's why all stats based markets and statistics on a particular game and live streaming are all in app now, so that you're not watching something else in a browser or on a TV, that you can just immerse yourself in the experience. So flash markets kind of fit within that thought process quite neatly, because you can't put down the phone if you actually start to enjoy these type of markets. And they're not high margin, they're quite low margin. Actually, for the punter, it's an area where you could beat it, because it's a technical challenge to try stay on top of everything that's happening and keep up with the context of the game as much as anything else. So it's in that sense, it can be a bit of fun for the punter. And I think it's a
lower margin?
Product. It's just harder to make margin. Like they might have margin baked into the price, but it's just harder to know what's going on, because a lot of it's automated, right? And you're going to have traders watching the higher turnover games to add some context to the price. But if you want to scale it to a lot of games, it just doesn't. The economics aren't there to have somebody watching every single game. So then you're relying on the automation factor. And if somebody wants to have an edge on looking at a lower level game where ball's going out for a throw and it's slow, and the game is slowing down, and you just know nothing much is going to happen in the next minute, then you can have a bet on a flash market. But that's where the challenge goes back. You're hitting the ball back over the court then to the bookmaker to say, okay, the challenge is put to you. You want to scale the product. You're going to have to accept that you're not going to have the context of somebody forensically analyzing a lower level game, but you still have to offer a price for it. This goes back to my whole recreational argument at the start.
Yeah.
If you want to have that breadth of content, you're going to have to react to what your customers do very quickly and have a really sharp engine that says, right, this guy usually beats us, so we're obviously missing something in this match, so sharpen your price quickly. But on the surface, the reason for Flash Markets, it's a recreational product. It's something that's fun and it's engaging and it keeps people on app. So that's essentially the main selling points of it.
But I would assume that, just like an Arbor or something like that, if you win a couple of those Flash Market bets in a row, I would assume that's a pretty easy way to get yourself restricted.
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, every bookmaker has a different restriction policy. I would definitely, you should keep these customers to certain levels so that they'll actually help you keep the product alive, so you can react to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, my next question was going to be is betting these Flash Markets. Is it more than just a punt? Like, do you think you can actually predict these things based on statistics, maths, these kind of things?
Oh, definitely, yeah, 100%. It's actually, again, it's probably low. They're going to be lower limits, because it's a little bit more nuanced and harder to actually get it right. So yeah, you're not going to make huge money out of it. But if you spend time looking at Flash Markets and just even having a broad understanding of what typically happens at different times within a game and what favorites typically do, or what certain teams typically do. Essentially that's the building blocks of a model, and then to find an edge over and above that, you just have to really contextualize to what you're looking at and saying, I know that the model is probably thinking this way because this is typically what happens, but it's so obvious in this situation that's not going to happen because they're just tapping around the ball or something, or they're clearly slowing the game down. So that's where Flash Markets are exposed. But look, bookmakers know this as well. It's not they're providing the product with their eyes open. They know that there's places where it can be beaten, but it can still be a bit of fun for a punter to find those spots. But you're right, you probably get restricted.
Yeah. More on in-play markets, mate, in general. Are in-play markets something the bookmakers want to incorporate, or do you think there's just a bit too much risk there? I mean, most have incorporated it now, but yeah.
In-play is very popular, yeah. In-play is I think that's any bookmaker that's worth their salt really wants a good in-play offering, and they invest a lot in it. They invest a lot in all parts of it. 365 have been fantastic over the years, adding streaming services to most matches and content that's always available and pricing that's accurate and fair. They're the main things that a bookmaker is going to think about. Again, with the goal to keep you on app and immersed in their product and enjoying. That's ultimately they want you to consume the content from their product, not anyone else's.
Yeah, is it a profitable segment for bookies, do you think?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And it's competitive, so I don't think they're taking huge margin. And this is probably where sustainability comes in, where you're taking, over your entire customer base, you're taking a small enough margin, but that means that, if a customer has €100 to spend, you're not going to take it off in 3 or 4 bites. It's going to take a lot longer, so the customer gets a longer experience, which means they enjoy the product more, which means they stay on app more, which means they consume from you for a longer period of time. And that's probably where ultimately most products need to go to. It gets more complicated with regulatory environments where maybe there's higher taxes and as a result higher margins, and it gets more challenging for the bookmaker to be that competitive. But ultimately, I think most bookmakers with scale they won't want to rinse their customers. That's not their goal. Their goal is actually to provide something entertaining. So I think in play is you're watching the game. That's the time to get somebody engaged with the product. So it's definitely an area where they'll invest.
Yeah, I mean, would you say they're more profitable, like in-play markets, than pre-game bets or markets?
More profitable.
for the bookmaker?
Yes, like not in terms of margin, but in terms of volume. That's where to see a lot of activity. In terms of margin, like pre-game accumulators are probably the most profitable. Or profitable. I'm thinking of profitable as like, I'm thinking of profitable is actually at the end of the day how much cash you make, not the margin on it. So I'm going to say yes. That's where a lot of their GGR comes from at the end of the year. Is in play.
Oh wow, it's really interesting. Which kind of, would you say there's like certain sports that lend themselves nicely to in-play betting from a punter's perspective, or are they more
tennis
like
tennis is the obvious one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's quite challenging to sorry. Is it a bit more challenging to design an in-play model for tennis?
No, not really. And it's a market that's well served. Probably ripe for a little bit of innovation, tennis. I'd say something will come in the next few years where there'll be new betting types on tennis. But there's so many tennis events on, and it's on all year round, and it's on all through the day. And it's one that's really lends itself to having a tennis stream, alongside your betting product, and just have your phone, watch the match, have a bet. It has that, inherent to it is a flash market in next point and next game. Like it kind of builds up those type of flash markets just by the design of the game. So you capture everybody from wanting to bet something that ends in the next 30 seconds to the next minute, the next 5 minutes, and so on. So it's a really neat little in-play product, and it's not a surprise that it's typically in the top 3 of turnover sports for bookmakers.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first started betting years ago, and you go on Bet365, and they'd be streaming some tennis match, which literally looked like it was someone in someone's backyard between two players. You just had no idea, who they were, and so I guess that makes sense. So you're thinking, like, from your perspective, it seems like a pretty in terms of in play, if you're going to hone in on one sport as a punter, you'd be looking at something like tennis.
Yeah, well, like when you're talking about sports that are popular and on during the day in this side of the world, tennis, it's no surprise that tennis has grown over the years. Like something that's really pre-play focused would be horse racing. It's already a short enough event, it's a 3 or 4 minute race, and I guess the DNA of people who follow horse racing love to bet as well. So it's like, who's going to win the race? Get your bets on before it starts. And if anything, in-play horse racing just facilitates people who just missed the start of the race and want to get bets on. In-play betting has grown over the years, but it's that's a popular pre-match sport. Tennis is a popular in-play sport. But now as America opens up to new gambling, I like something like NFL, I think must be pretty compelling in-play sport. It's on for I don't really watch it, but it's on for hours. And baseball's another one, these type of sports. I think cricket is quite popular in play as well. Something that you're going to sit down and watch the game for all day long. You're not going to have a match bet. You're going to have something that happens and finishes within the game.
Oh, mate, I was going to say, it's a bit rich of me to be saying how boring NFL is when I can sit down and watch a whole day of cricket. So, I'm not the man to talk about stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was going to move on to prepackaged accumulators, which I think is kind of an interesting concept, because on one hand, I think, if a bookmaker is able to sit down and package up a few legs of an accumulator, they must, it's really easy for them to apply a nice margin to it. But I guess on the other hand, like you said on your website, it's a really good way of social media interaction. And, if you can combine, like if it was like a Liverpool win, Mohamed Salah to score, these kind of things, like you just think that, a punter's going to latch onto that and think, oh, he always scores, like I'll get onto that. And it creates a bit of interaction that way. Is it, I'm thinking that like maybe it's the opposite, where you probably don't need to apply a margin at all. If anything, maybe make it a bit more favourable towards the punter, because it's a good way of, people see it and go, oh my God, that's ridiculous price.
Yeah. Well, look, the same goes for this as the Bet Builder. It's actually Bet Builder pre-made for you. It's people who don't really want to build a bet. They want to actually just have a look at it. It's like going into a sandwich shop and picking a sandwich off the menu rather than trying to build or make one yourself. Depending on who you're talking to, some would say that that's more popular than Bet Builder. I think it really depends on how you position your product and which one you want to shout about more. But why not have both of them and decide as a brand what you want to do. I think pre-packaged are more suited to in-play, because as things are happening in play, if you're in the middle of building a bet and the context changes in the game, Bet Builder hasn't really got to a place yet where it's a compelling in-play proposition. It's the user experience of it haven't considered it enough. Pre-packaged ones I think could be very suited in play, because they could start becoming contextualized in time, where if one of the players has been spoken about a little bit more by the commentators, or if they're involved more in the game than you would have expected, start pushing them to the top of the fold, and people will start thinking, well, he's had a lot of shots so far in the game, this makes sense, he's going to score next, and they're also going to win the game, and you're spending a lot of time up that side of the pitch, so there's bound to be more corners. So people get quite excited about something that seems like an obvious winner, but then when you actually go and do the maths on it, just probably you can put more margin in it. And it's the counter argument to that, because you can create these kind of subliminal messages that says this is an obvious thing that will win, but it's hard to understand actually what the probability is. So anytime it's hard to understand what the probability is, it's actually easier to put in more margin, because nobody's going to pull you up on it. Yeah. So, but at the moment, I would say there's still high margin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Completely wrong. Sorry about that. Yeah. I thought this is the typical looking into it too much to come up with a completely different scenario.
Look, it all comes down to honesty. I think it's the simplest way to look at it is new products are typically higher margin. But when I say a higher margin, I mean the margin, the intended margin. So the bookmaker will put more margin on the product, but they mightn't necessarily achieve that margin. So it's more like saying they're being defensive with the product. Yeah. They want to get it live and they want to learn about it, so they're going to be defensive. And if you're defensive, you're going to apply more margin. But it also means that they're not as confident. So in those instances, then you'll find edges, but you have to beat something that's been more conservative. So you just have to work a bit harder. And then you're also faced with lower limits. So you can't get big stakes on. So it's always a hard thing to actually try and make any real cash from.
Yeah, no, I always remember back, I think it was episode 37 with Matt Howard. He was saying to me, and I've carried this through, is that like just because a bookmaker offers has got a higher margin, it almost can. It's a sense of like you're able to take more advantage of them, because it shows that they're less confident in their model and what they're pricing. So, although higher margins seem more unattractive, it can be a place where punters can exploit too.
Yeah, no, he's spot on. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mate, I've got a few more general questions for you. We talked about this a little bit before the podcast, but does Banach, obviously I assume most of your suppliers or people that you supply to, or book businesses that you supply to, are of the soft bookmaker model. Is Banach ever are you guys open to creating a product, maybe not, your in-play markets like we've mentioned, but some kind of product for sharper bookmakers, like ones like Pinnacle, like we mentioned before?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If kind of from a business development point of view, we always get involved in any opportunities like that and talk about it. But I guess my role in particular is to identify markets where I think we, where there's an opportunity for us to grow and to add value. And as you can see from our product set, we've been positioning ourselves as adding services to bookmakers targeting recreational customers and the high street bookmaker and the ones we're all familiar with. There's not many examples of Pinnacle type bookmakers, and it's a complex organ. I actually really respect Pinnacle because, you know, it's actually quite complex and difficult to do what they're doing, and to do it very, very well. So it would excite me to work on a project like that, but at the same time, I don't think it's the low-hanging fruit for us. There's a lot of excitement in America at the moment with, you know, different states legalizing gambling, and the demand is going to be for more and more entertaining product types in the betting space. And, you know, for me, I think positioning the company where we can actually play a role in that and create a profitable company providing products to that type of market is probably the obvious route for us to take. I probably have to try and silence my more, I guess, curious side where I'd like to go and, you know, play the game more on the getting the price right and getting to the 100% line and sharpening that. But unfortunately, I think it's the recreational and the entertaining product side is where the real game is for a company like us. So in short, to answer your question, yes, definitely always open to conversations, but it's hard to see how an opportunity like that will outweigh the opportunities that are presenting themselves in the States, especially, and just still opportunities this side of the world as well. There's always room for new innovative product.
Yeah, other than like what you just stated there, the fact that you're probably going to make a bit more money from servicing a recreational bookmaker, is there, like, what would be like some of the other bigger challenges that you would face for going with more of a Pinnacle model?
Well, it's just a different challenge completely, right? It's like you'd position the entire organization differently if you're going with the Pinnacle model. And it just comes back to what type of customer you want to target. So, like, friends of mine who watch football and like betting on football probably don't. The last place to want to bet is probably Pinnacle, because Pinnacle, you know, they purposely don't target these type of customers. They're not offering a huge amount of product. Their interface doesn't, you know, lend itself to something that someone that I know would like to just have a simple experience on an app. But I'd much prefer to bet with Pinnacle. So if we're positioning ourselves to do a Pinnacle model, what we need to start doing is really, really focusing on the price and building, spending our time refining models where the turnover is. So refining match betting prices, refining total prices, and creating processes around reacting to bets and risk management systems that continuously sharpen and change the line based on real-time behavior and real-time action. Now we still do a little bit of that, and we want to do more of it on the product that we have, but we try to balance that with creating more content and more bet types. So you can't do everything, I suppose, is what I'm saying. And the demand and the opportunities in front of us are like, just create more bet types, create more content, create more entertaining products. So you end up just getting your quants and your engineers to work on those type of things and solve those type of problems. While you probably still have a stream of work, you know, sharpening lines and trying to create sharp prices, but you have to either go one way or the other. So if you go all in on the Pinnacle model, you put everybody sharpening the match betting line and sharpening the main lines, and it's just a different challenge, really. That's all.
Yeah, mate. Last question for you, and I think it's a good question for someone who's in the position you are, because we normally don't get someone that's, you know, on the B2B side or the bookmaker side, I guess, of things. So from your perspective, mate, like, what advice would you give to people out there, like, looking to make a long-term profit from betting? I'm not looking for, like, you know, there's a list of things you have to do, but maybe like one or two of the most important pieces of advice you think you'd give to people.
This is probably just more from my perspective. Right, so my background is a quantitative background, so I always kind of like to build systems that are automated and don't carry too much manual overhead. So my advice, just bear in mind, my advice is going to come from that kind of philosophy. So I think if you woke up in a particular morning and you wanted to find prices that were that actually have positive margin in your favor. And what I mean by that is that the price is actually wrong. Like you'll find way more in soft bookmaker websites. Like there's no doubt about that. But if you're thinking long term, I just don't think you're going to, especially if you want to create something that you're going to put time into automating and creating a proper system. Like I just can't see a future in doing something where you get restricted and you have to start again and get restricted and find another edge and get restricted and find another edge. I just feel like, geez, that's tough going. So if you really want to do it properly, I think you focus your attention on the exchange and you focus your attention on where you can really create an edge and a sustainable edge that will last forever, and you can basically do it professionally, or maybe focus on toad pools where pari-mutual pools where they're not going to restrict you because it doesn't matter to them. They're just looking for volume. But that's if you want to make proper full-time living out of it and know that you can not have to work again. That's where I'd focus. But if you actually just want to make a profit betting, I do think you're going to find way more opportunities than the bookmakers. So just keep doing it, but just bear in mind that it's like one of these things that you're always going to have to start again and find another account and find another edge, and you're always going to try and duck and dive and try and see how you can survive. Maybe it's a bit easier in Australia because I think to take higher bets, but guaranteed minimums kind of. But
I mean, the horse racing limits has been a great thing that they've been able to implement over here. So, I mean, we're looking to implement that into our software, and hopefully we can, find a decent edge there. Because that's the problem with our software is that you can it can be a bit of a shit fight trying to fight off all the limitations, and there is an end point. So hopefully. At least for Australians, it's if we can get horse racing in there, then you might not have to worry about that anymore. Yeah,
but take from my perspective, I don't know if I have any accounts. I have accounts with one or two bookmakers, but they're accounts where I've purposely kept them recreational because I just wanted to have a punt. But like early days when I started in Paddy Power and I started to learn about how to find an edge, I just a bit of naivety as well. I got my accounts closed very quickly. Because I was just betting on stuff that I was being too obviously to knowing that when prices are wrong, and I guess you don't want to be too obvious in it if you want a bit of longevity. But don't fool yourself. It's not impossible to beat the bookmaker. Like don't try to be all things to everybody. Find a niche that kind of back to what was episode 37 was a Matt or somebody you said, find products where the bookmaker has a little bit less confidence in their pricing or it's new, and just understand what are the building blocks to that price and think about it yourself and just find a niche and focus on it. And the biggest challenge for bookmakers is they have to produce hundreds of thousands of prices. So as a punter, all you have to do is focus on one or two. Like you're definitely going to beat them. There's no doubt about it if you focus on one or two.
100%. That was something that a fellow called J. Ratnam came on the podcast and said that too. He's like, that's the biggest. A good guy, he said that's the biggest advantage that you've got. I mean, you can go and some bookmakers you can go and bet on the Malaysian women's third division or something like that. You know what I mean? So.
There's no doubt about it. Like, if you pick a niche that's don't pick Premier League match betting. Well, if you beat that, fair play to you. Brilliant. You're going to make a lot of money, and go on the exchange as well, make money there. But just pick something a little bit more niche and just focus on it and put in the time. Just think about it from a bookmaker's point of view. The volume's coming in on the most popular events. That's where they're going to put the most trained experts. That's where they're going to invest in their technology, and they're going to try to provide a service everywhere else. And they're not going to look into all the different nooks and crannies. So find something niche and have a bit of fun beating that for a while, and be savvy around trying to not be seen for a while, But I just don't know how much you can make doing that. You definitely make a bit, but it's always a headwind, isn't it? Where you're inevitably going to be restricted.
Yeah, no, terrific stuff, mate. And I should probably say before I leave you that shout out to Anthony Kaminskas. I'll never be able to pronounce his.
I think you got it right there.
Yeah, for recommending you to come on the podcast, and I'll gladly say that you didn't babble as much as him either. So congratulations.
I didn't mention Rochdale once.
we kept it to 1 hour, mate. Unlike him, who added on an extra 45 minutes. So sorry, Anthony, if you're listening, mate. But yeah, mate. Probably just good to let everyone know where they can find Banach, and and maybe if you want to tell them about any projects you've got going on at the moment.
Yeah, I guess they we're spending a lot of time investing in American product. We're going to have our NFL product on live in the next few weeks, so exciting times to see what goes on there. But also plenty of good companies working in the market, so I think we're going to see some cool stuff. If you're not into NFL at the moment, Alex, you should probably start watching it, because there's going to be definitely lots of good betting product coming out in NFL and NBA and all these American sports in the next few years. So,
mate, if there's ever a time, hopefully, yeah. Awesome, mate. And yeah, thanks for coming on, mate. It's been brilliant getting to know more in depth about what you guys do, and some of the new technology and new markets that are going to be available to punters. So yeah, it gives people a bit more insight into how they work, and maybe they can find some more profitable segments for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, look, there's going to be loads. just watch all the new product coming out and have a bit of fun. Spotting where certain lines are inaccurate, but everybody plays a role then in making that product more competitive and more interesting, because it actually genuinely, in the grand scheme of things, it's good when punters come in and find edges, because then the bookmaker can improve the product and improve the service from that type of information. So American sports is definitely something to have a look at over the next few years.
Yeah, I don't know. Are you able to say what bookmakers you supply for?
So we supply for Labrix, Coral. We supply for Foxbet, for BetStars, for and then Reta in Spain, and Hollywood Bets in South Africa. So there's a few, and Betson as well in Scandinavia. So there's a few that we supply for, and hopefully a growing list as well.
Yeah, cool, mate. Well, I guess people, if they're going to want to check out your stuff, then they're the
definitely. Yeah, we're always keen. Anyone who ever want to have a chat, reach out and talk to us. Just cool to see what's going on. But yeah, for your listeners, definitely keep an eye on America. There's going to be, even move over there. There's some fantastic sign-up bonuses and offers. And there's never a better time to be in a betting market and looking what's happening. So I guess if you're to ask that question again, what's your piece of advice for making money betting? Look to America. There's going to be brilliant products coming out. Move to America.
Give some life advice, mate. I love it.
There's definitely going to be some cool stuff to bet on and opportunities to find edges. There's no doubt.
No, terrific stuff, mate. And thanks everyone for listening. Make sure you do a quick rate and review of the podcast as always, and subscribe to us. And if you're looking to implement some of the strategies we talked about today, probably not any of the most of the things we talked about, but if you're looking to implement some kind of value betting strategy, try out a free week of Trademate Sports and start your value betting journey, mate. Mark, thanks once again, and
thanks for having me
back on some other day, maybe when you've got a few more interesting products on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. See you guys.
Lovely. Thanks, Alex. Bye-bye.